Hello, good people of YouTube. Mountbatten here. And today, with Mode Shuffle being back in the game, I was yet again going out and about into Mode Shuffle and taking some unusual secondary ships, I guess you could say, or some secondary ships that, aren't quite good enough, in my opinion, to full build into secondaries for random battles, but you might be able to get away with it in Mode Shuffle. And one of those ships I took out is the subject of today's video. A ship that I get asked all the time, why do I just disregard the secondary build, or why don't I run a secondary build on this ship? And that is the Tier 9 Japanese premium battleship, the Iwami. Now, the Iwami, she was first introduced as the high-tier secondary or brawling Japanese battleship originally when she was first announced. And there's a couple of things that she's got going for her that definitely you might see and be like, oh yeah, definitely see how this is supposed to be a brawling battleship. First and foremost is that she does have Harugumo turrets bolted to her decks. You see, the Harugumo guns that the Harugumo, the Japanese Tier 10 gunboat, gets are some very, very good secondaries to have. Why? Well, you see, with the guns that the Harugumo has, those shells come flying out of the barrels at 1,000 meters a second, giving them a very, very high base pin level. So the Harugumo turrets can pin 30 millimeters of armor, and they have a very fast reload time. The base reload time on the Iwami secondary guns without the module is 2.8 seconds. When you put the secondary module on there, it drops it down to 2.3 seconds. That is a very, very fast reload time to have on your secondary guns. And keep in mind, that is before you get adrenaline rush going and all that jazz as well. So, pretty nice. And she gets 4 of these turrets per side. So you basically have, a Harugumo bolted to either side of the Iwami. So right there, it's like, oh, okay, definitely, those are some great secondary guns. And you also get torpedoes, 1 per side. Granted, they are mounted at the stern of the ship, so the angles aren't that great, but still, you have torpedoes, great for brawling. And the Iwami hull is not like, German battleship levels protected, but it's definitely better than, like the Yami's hull is for getting in there and brawling. So, with those characteristics, again, looks like a brawling battleship. But once you take a closer look, it all kind of falls apart, in my opinion, for a couple of reasons. First off, the secondary battery range, the maximum range with the full build, full commander skills, and the flag is a whopping 10.5 kilometers. Which isn't very good. That's bad secondary range by Tier 8 standards, let alone Tier 9. So that's pretty rough. And the torpedoes, like I said, the angles aren't that great, but they do go to 20 kilometers for some reason, which is, again, a very odd decision that they made with the Iwami. It's like, okay, this is supposed to be like a secondary brawling battleship, I thought, but then you go and bolt 20-kilometer torps to it. What? What's wrong with like the 12-kilometer Shima torps? Because these are, I believe, the Shimakaze's 20-kilometer torpedoes. So, I mean, yeah, they hurt like hell when they do hit the enemy ship. Yeah, they have 967 alpha. That is their alpha. Yeah, these are Shimakaze's torpedoes. Why? If they're supposed to be the secondary battleship, why does it have 20-kilometer torps? It's just such a weird decision. So on top of that as well, the maximum speed of the ship without taking like brisk is 29.5 knots. So she's also very slow. And her concealment isn't like crazy, like it's not 10.5 or 11 kilometers, which would make sense to have the secondaries as such a short range if she was a very stealthy ship, but she's not. So I never really built into the ship for secondaries. I tried it, I think, once or twice during the initial Iwami review, but I just threw it out the window outside of that. But again, Mode Shuffles, it's here. And Mode Shuffle is, well, a place where usually you get some pretty close quarters action, and I did when I was playing the Iwami. I do also apologize. I was fighting not only the enemy team, but also my internet. when I was going through and playing the Iwami, so there's a couple of points where the game's kind of lagging. I think I disconnected once or twice, so I do apologize for that, but unfortunately there's nothing I can do about that. Pay $180 a month for internet, fastest speed that my ISP has, and they still find ways to screw me over left, right, and center. But anyway, what were the results of these matches, and is the Iwami really a secret secondary monster if you do build for it and you can get into those close quarter situations? Well, in most of the matches that I had, which were all convoys, by the way, the game refused to give me airship escort or even epicenter. I played convoys straight for about an hour. Wonderful. But anyway, I got usually around 200, 220, 230 secondary hits, which is for sure a lot of secondaries that you are getting on target. However, in most cases, the damage was kind of mediocre. Usually about 40-ish thousand damage between the pins and the fires. Now, there were a couple of games where I did get lucky with the fire RNG, and the secondaries were doing like 60,000 damage, which is definitely a very, very respectable number from the secondary guns. However, this is, of course, in a close-in, brawling game mode where it's expected that you'll get this close all the time. And there were plenty of times where missing that extra 2 kilometers of range on your secondary guns most definitely does hurt, or at least by Tier 9 standards, that extra kilometer of range. Most Tier 9 secondary ships can get out to at least 11.3, 11.5 kilometers, but again, with the Iwami, that is very much not the case. Now, the secondary guns also aren't like the secondary guns of old, where they have that improved accuracy. That could definitely help make up for the lack of range. If, sure, when you get in range, you're absolutely laser pointing, your shells to the enemy ship, and you're melting them down with no problem. But they aren't like that. They still, of course, take time to build up their accuracy, like every other ship in the game, and the less range really, really hurts the Iwami here for that. Now, on top of that as well, a big downside are the main battery guns. You see, the Iwami has 8 16-inch guns, 4, in the front, 4 in the stern, and that definitely does hurt it, because when you actually do a full main battery gun build in the Iwami, she's a really solid ship for that, which is very odd, again, given that this was originally introduced to us as, kind of a brawling battleship. But really, when you build into the main battery guns, you have a 24-second reload on them with the reload module, decent accuracy once you take the dispersion module, and that's where most players play their Iwamis. How I play my Iwami when I play her, again, the 20-kilometer torps kind of lean that way, so it's just such a weird design decision that Wargaming decided to go with here. So because you have a small number of 16-inch guns that are kind of meant to be medium to longish range guns, at close range, obviously your overmatching capabilities are not really there, and not taking the improved reload and the dispersion module, your main battery guns are really, really shotgunny, and that does definitely hurt it. So it's kind of like, in mode shuffle, it does definitely work, because you are getting closer to the enemy ships, mainly because they are also playing brawling battleships and secondary battleships, so they want to get in secondary range. But what's really miserable is when there's a full 2 kilometers that most of these Tier 9 and Tier 10 secondary ships can just absolutely chew on your battleship, where you can't chew on theirs. And even when you do finally get into your 10.5 kilometer secondary range, you still have to build up your accuracy, while the enemy ship has had 2 kilometers basically, however long it took you to get within your secondary range, while you were inside their secondary range to build up their secondary accuracy. So it's just kind of a miserable time, unless, again, you just come around a corner and you start blasting each other at the same time, which again does definitely happen. And considering the points investment you have to do in order to get a full secondary build, and the module investment, it just really doesn't seem like it's worth it. And it's much better played as a medium range main battery battleship. And that's, again, how I play my Iwami, and I do great with it in that case. It's not like the Shikishima, where the Shikishima, yeah, you have the Hurigamo secondary guns, but the ship is slow and all that jazz. The Shikishima still has her 20-inch guns to fall back on, that it doesn't really matter where the shells hit your ship. In most cases, it's going to do some type of damage because, overmatching 32 millimeters of armor and all that jazz. And of course, you get one shell to Citadel and you're doing huge damage numbers with the Shikishima, because she is, a much slow, much more lethargic ship when it comes to her speed and maneuverability. But you have those main battery guns to fall back on, and her secondary guns can get out to 11.5, 11.3 kilometers as well. So, well, yeah, sure, right now in mode shuffle, yeah, it can work. And I guess if you are able to force a brawling situation in random battles, sure, it can work in that case too. But it's just so much of an investment for what is, basically stunted secondaries because of that 10.5 kilometer range. Oh man, if they were to release a version of the ship without the torpedoes, or with like 10 kilometer torpedoes but with 11.5 kilometer secondary guns, it really would be a pretty solid secondary ship. But that lack of range just kills it so much for me. And there's just better ships out there. Pomeran's a much better choice for a tier 9 secondary ship than the Iwami. One day, fellas, we will get our secondary Japanese high-tier battleship, but it seems like today is still not the day. So guys, my 2 cents on the Iwami, taking a look at her in a secondary configuration, as many of you have been requesting in the in the past. So hopefully you got your answer here from me. So let me know in the comments down below, do you like the Iwami and her secondary guns, or do you think it's simply not worth it as well? Let me know all that jazz in the comments down below. Hope you guys have a wonderful Tuesday, wonderful rest of your week. I hope to catch you guys in the next one.